The most effective way to reduce cavity is not fluoridization, but nutrition and keeping sugar out of your diet or limiting it to fruits and natural occurring sugars. So in 1967, this dentist still believed that fluoride was not useful in the water and was not safe. But he never changed his opinion about fluoride. He believed that the people who had confidence in it should not expect to force it on the general public, but were free to take it or give it to their families in a tablet or pill, because after 8 years, it did nothing for the child and aided the risk in adults. No one has come forward with proof that fluoride cannot injure people who use it over a long period.
I want to introduce our guest, Dr. Tim Perenich. We're talking fluoride today. I think we kind of have a similar background where 20 years ago, we're filtering our water. We're concerned about things that people are like, you guys are crazy. What are you, afraid the communists are? What's the origins of that, by the way, where you're not supposed to be concerned about fluoride because of some conspiracy theory about communists? And so, how did this become mainstream?
New concerns about fluoride in drinking water.
A federal ruling is questioning how much of it is safe.
A federal judge in California has ordered the Environmental Protection Agency to address the potential impacts of fluoride in drinking water.
Researchers with the Department of Health and Human Services analyzed previously published research and said they determined, quote, with moderate confidence, that there is a link between higher levels of fluoride exposure and lower IQ in kids.
The Environmental Protection Agency could challenge that ruling, which could send the case to the Supreme Court. Lawmakers in some states aren't waiting for the courts.
It's time to update this law. Let's take this out.
The city of Monroe is considering removing fluoride it puts into its drinking water.
The city of Abilene isn't taking any chances.
As of right now, I've directed the utility department to stop adding fluoride to the city's drinking supply until the EPA makes a final ruling on what they're going to do.
200 million Americans live in communities that put fluoride in its tap water, and almost every toothpaste has fluoride in it.
Unfortunately, the CDC and the American Dental Association have ignored really decades worth of studies indicating harm from fluoride and chosen to work on the health of the tooth over the health of children's brains.
Utah just became the first state to remove fluoride from the water. We see now RFK Jr. coming forward and telling the CDC to stop recommending fluoride in drinking water as the EPA reviews new scientific information. So he has signaled he's going to tell the CDC to stop recommending fluoride. So that is a federal level move that is gigantic. And we're really hoping to see that. Obviously, we have Miami-Dade was the biggest county at this point waiting for that signature to end fluoridation there.
The reason why fluoride's come back into the mainstream is because of a circuit court case. It was a case brought before the Ninth Circuit, which is ironically this very, very same circuit that oversees Oregon, Washington, and California. So they are generally inclined to be more left of center. And this case went up to them, and the judge basically asked the EPA, do you have any studies to prove that fluoride doesn't cause neurological developmental delays or doesn't cause loss of IQ? And the EPA said, no, we've never done those studies. And what's funny is that research had been accumulating over the decades showing that it had. So that's how it kind of got started. And of course, with the nomination of RFK Jr. To the NIH, being over everything, the Secretary of Health and Human Services. So he's over everything. And him saying, I think we'll be able to get fluoride out of the water. This has sort of brought fluoride back to the mainstream. But fluoride long ago was normally thought of as a neurotoxin. It used to be put in rat poison, bug spray, and things like that. And so people were skeptical of fluoride before it became one of the large public health victories. 1956, magical new fluoride toothpaste. I mean, imagine that. We're so used to fluoridated toothpaste that we're just like, oh, everyone has it. But they were saying, look, this toothpaste has fluoride. This is great. We're following the science. And again, they hailed it as this miracle that was going to save people from tooth decay. But here's the interesting thing. This is from the WHO. And this is in 1961. So this is from the WHO. And so the WHO got early on promoting fluoride. And they were like, hey, we want fluoride in the water. And they were lobbying the different countries to say, put fluoride in the water. And so they were supporting all this. And what happened is that they were tracking how counties were voting to put fluoride in the water. Now, listen to what they say here, because they're for it, but notice how Americans thought of fluoride in 1961. So it says this: election returns fluoridation. So how did the elections pan out in 1960 in 1960, most likely? It says, by late November, the American Dental Association reports at least 1 million citizens had been tallied as the losers in the elections, regardless of political affiliation. This figure represents the approximate population of communities in which fluoridation proposals are known to have been defeated at the ballot box. In 1961, you couldn't convince hardly anyone. Now, there are counties that did, and they mentioned that, the winners. But notice that they said millions of people voted not to have fluoride in the water. The question is, why wouldn't they want fluoride in their water? Dr. McKay was the dentist who was against fluoridation. He says, I wrote to Dr. McKay not knowing he had passed away in June of 1967. I'm sorry, this article was in 1968. And Miss McKay told me he never changed his opinion about fluoride. So in 1967, this dentist still believed that fluoride was not useful in the water and was not safe. And she said that he never changed his opinion about fluoride. He believed that the people who had confidence in it should not expect to force it on the general public, but were free to take it or give it to their families in a tablet or pill, because after 8 years, it did nothing for the child and aided the risk in adults. No one has come forward with proof that fluoride cannot injure people who use it over a long period. I concur with Dr. McKay's opinion. Now, I just want to get your take on this. One, what do you think about the public health argument he just made there, that if you want something that isn't proven to be safe or effective, you can have it, but to force it on the general public is wrong? What do you think about that?
Our bodies are the temple of the living God, and we are to offer our bodies as a living sacrifice or for a spiritual act of worship. That's Romans 12. And health choices are worship choices.
Yeah.
And that might sound like, really, fluoride? But no, everything I put in my body is a spiritual decision.
Scientist on the advantages of a way of life. So he's basically talking about how to keep your teeth. And they both agree that the most effective way to reduce cavity is not fluoridation, but nutrition and keeping sugar out of your diet or limiting it to fruits and natural occurring sugars. And so they both agree that's the best way to go. Here's an interesting study, okay? So this study was published in 1969. So fluoridation roughly happens in the 50s, and it depends on where it's happening, in some places in Europe. And so they start doing these studies, and they're looking at this. And this was, again, published in the Annals of Rheumatological Disease in 1969. And they report the idea that fluoride actually causes bones to have fluorosis. And they're not talking about heavy duty amounts. They're talking about regular amounts. And they realize that this is a problem even in there. They are mentioning that it's going to cause the bones to break apart. And they look at this and they're saying, maybe there's a problem here. Maybe we should start to look at this because it's causing degeneration in the bones, degeneration of the joints, which would be rheumatological diseases. So it's interesting. Notice what he says here, the big ones. So here are the big ones. In some countries, fluorides are used tentatively in the treatment of osteoporosis, metastatic bone disease, and Paget's disease. But then he looks at it that higher doses over longer periods of time causes toxic problems to the body and skin. So it's very interesting that this is in 1969 and they're already beginning to question it. This is in 1990. So people thought that there were problems with fluoride even back then, and they were studying it. And so the Cancer Institute noted that some cancers developed more rapidly in areas where fluoridation was in the water. They noticed this because fluoride has the ability to break down tissues and mess with your immune system and neurologically hurt you as well. So they researched it. Now, ultimately, the National Cancer Institute concluded in rats that fluoride was safe and effective. That's what they concluded. However, in the discussion, they show these tissues, and of course, it's difficult to make out what's there in the black and white. But essentially what they conclude is that in these tissues, they notice precancerous changes in these rats. They actually conclude that people who have kidney insufficiency, that they should not drink, or they should figure out how not to get as much fluoride in their water, or basically start going to bottled water, because it was going to be bad for them. And they even put a call out to public health. So you can see even here, and I think this is 1996 it was published. So this is 96. Even there, it starts to go. And again, this isn't like me making this up. This isn't
right.
This isn't some, alternative medicine rag where we're believing in chakras and things like that. This is actually people who are looking at the science here.
I like how you gave people kind of a solution there. How do we not, like, even if we don't have kidney problems, I think probably most of us want to be working on this fluoride question. And what are the action items that you give to people to drink the best water that they can drink? Because that's one of the laws of health. We want good quality water, uncontaminated. So what's your recommendation for how the audience gets good non-fluoridated water without other problems, like the guy who was mentioning his well, 60, 80 years ago.
Yep.
And, that might have been great then, but I live in an agricultural belt, and our well water is probably contaminated with glyphosate, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we filter ours with a gravity-fed, drip, drip, drip water style, like an Alexa Pure or Pro Pure or Berkey, like those kinds.
Yeah, those are
what do you recommend for people drinking good water?
So I've looked into this, and one of the things that they say is it's very hard to get fluoride, especially if they're dumping sodium fluoride into the water. Naturally occurring fluoride may be a little bit easier to take out. I'm not sure exactly why that is. Maybe because it's bound to something else. I don't know. I would imagine they're both tough, but generally they recommend using reverse osmosis. So I think that's the way to do it if you want to get rid of it. Obviously, sometimes bottled water, generally, if it's made with reverse osmosis, that's good. But you probably want to stay away from too many plastics. I mean, obviously, if you have to drink water, it's a challenge. I do recommend that anyone who's using water wherever they get it, we should start filtering. And unless you live out in Montana, Wyoming, or somewhere way out there where you can tap into a pure aquifer, you probably want to be filtering your water just to be on the safe side. Reverse osmosis, obviously the best one is distillation, but if you do distillation, you want to add maybe a tiny bit of Himalayan sea salt or something like that in, so you get some minerals back in. But otherwise, reverse osmosis. And now they make reverse osmosis filters for the entire house, so you can even bathe in it if you need to. But just depends on your budget and what you're willing to do. This study is from 2004. This is biomedical and environmental sciences. So it sounds like something we would all like today. And so what they looked at is they took human embryo hepatocytes, which are liver cells, and they wanted to see the effects of fluoride on it. And they tried to use roughly what would be the same type of levels you would get in your drinking water. And what they found is that fluoride could harm human liver cells, that it could cause damage to it. And they call it lipid peroxidation, which is the idea that it is causing lipids, which is fats, to be oxidized, and that causes more inflammation that damages liver cells or hepatocytes. So they found that, and again, this can drive cancer. When you damage cells and they start to die, this can drive cancer. This can drive cirrhosis. This can drive non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. All these other problems with the liver, this can drive that. It's not the main cause, but it may be a contributory cause, and it may certainly affect the liver. And again, this is what they found in 2004. So people aren't making it up. They had serious concerns from the very beginning about fluoride. They're looking at the research, and they said fluoride has been tied to bone cancer, lower IQs, osteoporosis. So why is it still being added to your water? Now, we're not going to have time to read the article, but they even show the history. And look, here's a nice picture here. You can see the person here. It may be hard for your screen, but you can see the person here. They have to wear the mask, and they're dumping.
Yep.
Yeah, you could see it in the water. And remember, I mentioned Dr. Strangelove, 1964. And they talk about how it got in there. And they do a great job documenting. And they get a quote from one of these doctors that says fluoridation could turn out to be one of the top 10 mistakes of the 21st century. That's how crazy this is, because they realize that it's not good. And of course, they have 10 steps into cutting back on fluoride. And they talk about finding out if your fluoride is in the water, make sure your children use non-fluoridated toothpaste, use filters. They even mention choose organic fruits and vegetables because they're going to have less fluoride in it. And then, of course, they talk about, they even talk about processed meat. Now, so many of us don't eat meat, so that's good. But for those who do, you're going to find higher amounts of fluoride in processed meats. And then, of course, make sure that your baby formula doesn't have any fluoride in it. So that was really good. But this is in 2006. And so you see that even here in this mainstream publication, they're saying, hey, fluoride isn't good. Fluoride is not good at all. So,
Dr. Tim, can I invite people to email me and I'll send them this article?
Yes.
Because this, if I'm in the listener's shoes, I get to have it right in front of me. I want to read this article.
Yeah.
So if you guys want this article from Prevention Magazine from 2006, just email me, scottritsema@gmail.com.
Yeah.
I'll cut these slides out and send that over to you.
And it says decreased intelligence in children and exposure to fluoride and arsenic in the drinking water. So again, fluoride is the main culprit, but they also throw in arsenic, which we know is toxic. But listen to what it says. In conclusion, the data from this research support the conclusion that fluoride and arsenic in the drinking water potential neurotoxic effect in children. It is urgent that public health measures to reduce exposure levels be implemented. Millions of people around the world are exposed to these pollutants and therefore potentially at risk for negative impact on intelligence. This risk may be increased where other factors affecting central nervous system development, such as malnutrition, poverty, are also present. The risk is particularly acute for children whose brains are particularly sensitive to environmental toxins. Furthermore, it'd be advisable to re-examine the benefit of fluoride given the document health risks. 2007.
This didn't start with RFK in this last election cycle or Joe Ladapo in Florida, did it?
That's right. If there's other sources of fluoride that you don't know about, if you're unable to excrete it for any reason, whatever it is, once you get too much, they notice that in addition to having dental fluorosis, that you also lose IQ points. And this is what they were saying in 2011. They were noticing that in India. Many people remember Mount Vesuvius destroying Pompeii. There was another city that was also destroyed, Herculaneum. Here's a fun fact for everyone. In AD 79, when Pompeii erupted and it buried Herculaneum when Mount Vesuvius erupted and it buried Herculaneum and Pompeii, there was two famous people or infamous people who were there at that time, mostly Felix and Drusilla from the Bible. Remember when Felix said, Paul, come back to me when I have a convenient season to hear you? Well, turns out he went and vacationed in one of those two cities and they were wiped out in this eruption.
Whoa.
I had to throw that in there because it's related to this. So here's the interesting thing is that after, the population there, because it was an active volcano and there was a lot of fluoride in their water already. And the fluoride is somewhat comparable to the amount of fluoride we have in our water today. And so after the volcano erupted and buried everyone in ash, their bones were perfectly preserved. You can see the corpses that were perfectly preserved in ash to this very day. So it was almost like a time capsule. It was a time capsule of what their health was like, particularly their bones. Not much soft tissue because most of that got burned off, but even their poses in death were preserved through all this ash and destruction. So
fascinating.
It's a time capsule. So what they looked at what the amount of fluoride in the water, and they were like, well, what did this do? And so you can see here in these pictures, and this is from the study itself. So they show these bones, and if you look where the arrow are, you can see the sternum, manubrium, what looks like a strange looking xiphoid process. It's actually quite, lost that. Let me bring that back up. It's actually quite fascinating because if you look at the bones, and again, most people are going to look at it and say, well, isn't that what bones look like when you get old anyways? No, it actually shows destruction to the bones. That there was levels of arthritis, osteoarthritis, to be specific, all sorts of degenerative changes in the bones. And you can see it all through here. This is the spine. This is the spinal column right here. And you can look on the edges. This is all osteophytosis. This is a CT scan here. You can see more osteophytosis. And this is the cervical spine here that shows degenerative joint disease. And they had a very high level of it, which tells us that even if we don't know what their IQs were, even if we don't know how it affected them cognitively, what we find is an unusually high level of degenerative bony change because of the amount of fluoride they were drinking in their waters. And so this article talks about the dangers of fluoride being in the water, because not just what it does to the brain, but what it does to the bones, and it hastens the actual degenerative changes that lead to debility and chronic pain. So you have to imagine that this had to be quite awful, that all these people here were suffering from that. And you can't see it, but in one of the bones, you can see tumors on it, all kinds of stuff. And they think it had everything to do with the levels of fluoride that they were drinking in the water. And again, this was accumulation. This wasn't just super toxic levels. This was low level, and they just accumulated it. And they
Dr. Tim, I know I told you to roll, but I'm thinking audience members might be like, I've been drinking city water for 50, 60, 70 years. Can you do anything to detox, to reverse some of this if you think you may have some of this?
I think yes, I do think so. I think one of the things that can help is anything that's going to help you get your kidneys to working better. So again, it's all going to go back with diet. You got to clean that up. If you become more alkaline, that's going to help you. Also, balancing your magnesium to calcium, making sure you're getting the right amount of magnesium. There's probably ways to excrete it, but I think it's mostly through your kidneys. So there are detoxes, there are cleanses, there are juice fasts, all those things. Anything that's going to increase renal excretion of these minerals in your body.
Get meat and dairy out. Isn't that hard on the kidneys?
Absolutely. Dairy. Yeah, because if the cows are drinking, or if the cows are eating grass that was sprayed with fluoridated water, that's going in the milk.
Well, and it doesn't meat harm the kidneys.
Right. All of it. Right. Meat. Well, yes, meat harms the kidneys as well. I think one of the largest causes of not renal toxicity, but kidney damage is type 2 diabetes. And type 2 diabetes, everyone thinks is a sugar disorder, but studies have shown that high-fat diets actually push type 2 diabetes.
Last words on fluoride.
Yeah, all I'd have to say is that sometimes our instincts about how to keep ourselves safe are worthy of further examination. So, when people were saying that they had a bad feeling about this, they went and did the research. And I think when someone says everyone has to have something, everyone needs to have this, it's safe and effective, and you don't feel right with it, go ahead and do the research to see maybe if your gut instinct is onto something. It's not always, right? We don't go by feelings, but sometimes it's important to do a little bit more research, and you'll be surprised what you find.